All right, welcome to our latest BuffZone podcast. Now on video this year for the first time ever. And Pat Rooney, nice to see your face. And we're going to talk about another football game and review one, but then also preview one, and then also I'll get your thoughts on some of the other things going on in CU sports. Different from the other things I do is you and I will talk about some of those other sports as well, and we'll touch on that. But as always, this time of year, we're going to keep it mostly football. And let's start off with thoughts on North Dakota State.
Good to see you too, Brian. Good to see us rocking the video, getting up to speed here in 2024. We're probably about 8 years too late, but that's about that's about par for the course for you and I. But hey, it was a fun night at the opener. It played out, I think, pretty much the way both of us said on this podcast last week, that it would be closed for a while, and the Buffs would find a way to pull away a little bit at the end. And that's pretty much what happened. I don't know that the Buffs exactly wore them down. I was impressed, and this has been talked about, with how the defense kind of responded to a poor start for sure, and was able to get some stops kind of in the middle portion of that game, especially to start the second half, to kind of let the offense do its thing. So they have to be a lot better. We touched on the offensive line, the run game. I talked about those a little bit in my 3 points this week and in the post game column. That has to be better going forward. I think we all know that. I think the jury is still out on whether it will be. But all in all, an impressive opener. Got the win under the belt, and obviously a tough road trip to follow up this week.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. I was chatting with somebody else about this, but the whole time leading up to this game, the narrative for people about Colorado was, man, this is a tough game for the Buffs. North Dakota State's not easy. Why would you schedule them? This is a tough one. They're on upset alert, and then they win the game, and it's like, oh, you only beat an FCS team by 5 points.
Yeah.
And my take on it is that's a good win. It wasn't totally pretty. There was a lot of pretty parts about it. Mostly Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders. I like the defense, the way they responded as well. There's certainly things to clean up. I think that was a really good first game. And we talked about it last week, that I thought it was a good test for them out of the gates, that it was going to really kind of test our offensive and defensive lines. But I'm also one that I don't like to read too much into one game. I think there's a lot to be said for you work out some kinks in game one, especially with so many new parts. That offensive line, that group of five had never played together, not only as a unit, but there's no two guys on that line that ever played a football game together. So you expect it to not look great. It didn't look great, but I thought it looked better than it did last year, and giving up only one sack. Last year, their low was 3. So I thought there were some good things out of last week, and certainly things to clean up.
Yeah, only one sack allowed. I did think Shedeur Sanders got hit quite a bit, especially in the first half. But that's another thing I think got cleaned up a little bit as the game went on.
Yeah.
And I wrote about the time. I still don't know how we got that pass off to Jimmy Horn. He was getting buried at the time, but what a strike. But that's one thing that's going to be able to set this team apart from others is on most days, they're going to have the two best players in the game in Sanders and Travis Hunter, as you already mentioned. That's going to be able to carry them quite a ways. I think this week will be a great litmus test for both of those fronts, on offense and on defense. We didn't see the running game get on track. They had a couple different guys, kind of a surprise ball carry out of the gate as well. Trying it, but it was a lot the same as last year. Defensively, they got better as the game went on, but a tough young quarterback this week. So I agree with you. I don't want to put too much on one game, but I think this week we'll have a better sense of where those two fronts are going forward.
Yeah. Apparently Deion Sanders hasn't heard of this, but most coaches I've talked to have said you make the most improvement from game 1 to game 2. When I said that to him, he goes, "Well, was that written somewhere? Where'd you see that?" And it was kind of to me, a funny little moment. I'm just joking about him, but there are coaches that say that all the time, right? And so I think that the main point in that is that you now have a game under your belt that, not only can you watch a game of film of Nebraska now, but you can watch yourself on film, and you can see some things on game day that maybe you didn't see in practice that you can improve upon. So I do think a lot of improvement can be made from game one to game two. I still think there's a lot of room improvement for this Buffs team. I think they can make that improvement. And so I'm looking forward to this game because I think it provides that opportunity to make that improvement.
I'll ask you this: can they win this game this week at Nebraska without making some plays in the run game? And I'm not talking, they don't have to run for X amount of yards or get 2 rushing touchdowns, but without an effective running game, a running game that makes a difference on this drive or that drive, can they win this game without it?
I think they can. I think it's really difficult to do that, though. I think that you've got to have some games or some plays, in my opinion, in the run game. I think that is. I don't know if it's totally essential. I think it makes the task a lot easier if you can get something going. I would love to see even a 9, 10, 11 yard run by a running back. Yeah, a couple of those. And,
Yeah.
there was that one drive, we talked about it, and, it's been talked about that drive where they missed the 3rd and 1 and the 4th and 1. Well, that was a 4-play drive that was all Dallin Hayden, and I liked seeing that
Yeah.
in theory, but they didn't get the necessary yards. I want to see a drive like that where they get the yards. And maybe in those four
Right.
carries, you get 2 first downs instead of 0. And so I think it's important to do things like that.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking in the press box as that sequence was unfolding. I'm a little old school. I still hate it when it's fourth or third and half a yard and you're in the shotgun.
Yeah.
I know that's just kind of the way of things, but especially behind an offensive line that struggle, it's hard to kind of establish and maintain the blocks when you're just packed in to guard against the yard if you're the defensive side. But be that as it may, I think everyone agreed with the call, right? I haven't heard anyone kind of be like, well, they really shouldn't have gone for it there. Like, no, they should have, and they should have gotten the yards.
Yes.
And they need to be able to do more of that going forward. We've talked about it. I've written about it. They don't need to be the Big 12's best rushing attack, but the other side of it is the longer it goes on, the more defenses are going to be able, especially the pass rushers, are going to be able to pin their ears back and come after Shedeur Sanders, and that's going to spell trouble. The better teams they play going forward, they can't afford to keep getting him knocked around without a run game. And without something in that aspect that defenses at least have to respect a little bit, I think eventually it can erode into what we saw last year, that he just gets beat
Yeah.
up a little bit more and a little bit more every week.
Yeah, and we're now 13 games into the Coach Prime era and have yet to see much of a run game. I'd like to see that, at some point this season. I think it'd be huge for this team to reach their goals if they can get a run game going. And, in that 4th and 1, 3rd and 1 situations, I'd love to see a fullback type, put a tight end back there, blocking. They did a couple times last year where they brought a couple defensive linemen in to play, quote, tight ends, and try to get a push. I'd love to see some creativity in that on those short yardage. I agree with you. I don't love shotgun on those situations. I think when you're trying to get a yard or 2 feet, it doesn't help you, in my opinion, to stand 5 yards back of the line of scrimmage. Be as close as you can get, and give Dallin Hayden that full steam ahead for 5, 6 yards, and get that yard. So I think it's important to do it. I think they can win without it. To go to your original question, I just think it's important to get it done at some point soon.
I touched on this in my 3 extra points a little bit and wanted to get your opinion. But what did you think of Traylon Miller getting the first carries out of the backfield? We've heard all offseason about this revamped running backs room, and how it's going to be an improved group this year. And kind of out of left field was a true freshman, getting the first stab at it.
I liked some creativity. Had he been the featured guy all night, that would have been really weird to me. But I know they love him and his versatility. I like the creativity and kind of throwing them off a little bit and using somebody different. I think they got enough weapons on offense that we might see similar things throughout the year where maybe it's not always Draylon Miller, but might be other guys. It's like all of a sudden, like, whoa, where'd he come from? He hasn't been around in 4 weeks, and now he's like got 4 catches for 40 yards. So I liked it. I thought it was kind of a nice wrinkle, but it was interesting with the running back room that there's all these talented backs. You only use two of them, and there wasn't a whole lot of carries among them either.
Yeah, we'll see how that situation evolves going forward. And certainly, though, the passing game was on top of things. Shedeur Sanders is going to be fun to watch all
Yeah.
season. We've talked about that. But I guess I wonder just how long it's sustainable if they have to outscore people every week. And then
Yeah.
if your offense winds up being one dimensional, basically you're asking the passing game to outscore opponents on their own every week. Maybe we'll see something different this week because I think if ever a game was going to come down to the trenches, this might be it for the Buffaloes. So we'll see how that evolves. But boy, that's a lot of pressure to go into week in, week out to carry the load like that.
Yeah, and that's what Shador did last year. Yeah, last year, right? Was that was kind of their thing, and he did a fairly good job of it. But we saw, that pressure. It's some not too much for him mentally, but that's just a lot for one guy to kind of carry the load. I do think though that this defense is going to help them out more so than last year's defense, and I liked some of the glimpses we saw of that on Thursday night against North Dakota State, and yeah, they gave up some drives early in the game. I like the way they settled in and kind of got comfortable a little bit in what they were doing. I think with a game of film on Nebraska, I think they can go out there and have a good game plan. I don't know if they're going to shut them down, but I think they can go out there and have a good game plan this week.
Yeah, I think one thing that impressed me about we touched on this in the opening with the defense kind of getting it turned around. We didn't see a lot of that last year. I don't know if you want to call it halftime adjustments, in-game adjustments,
Yeah.
maybe just a matter of settling in the opener in this case. But we didn't see a lot of cases of the team kind of really buckling down in the second half of games last year. So that was really impressive to see. If that's something that a new coordinator, defensive coordinator, I should say, Robert Livingston brings to the mix, that's certainly going to be an asset because we didn't see a lot of that last year. And this week, it'll be a different kind of test going after one of the top freshman quarterbacks in the nation for Nebraska.
Yeah, and I'm writing about that today, actually, about how this is going to be a battle of elite quarterback talent, and certainly Dylan Raiola in a different stage of his career than Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur being a senior, projected #1 pick in the draft by some people next spring. Well, Dylan Raiola is just getting started. He's got to play 3 more seasons of college. Well, 2 more after this, so college football. So just getting started. But a 5-star freshman, #2 recruit at quarterback in the country this last year. And I just did a quick glance today, Pat, of the top 25 quarterbacks for 247 Sports in the 24 class. He's the only one that got a start in the opener. So
Yeah.
they're putting a lot on him, but he looked pretty solid. 17 of or 19 to 27, I think it was, 238 yards, couple of touchdowns. He's a good arm talent. His dad played O-line for the Lions for 14 years, and so he's got that. He grew up in an NFL household, right? And so I think he's got some of that professionalism to him. But I like him. He's a good talent.
Certainly looking forward to watching him play. And much like the BuffZone line, you wonder how much having a game under his belt, maybe settling in a little bit, will help a young quarterback like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be obviously they always sell out in Nebraska, so I don't know if the crowd will be much different, but you'd expect it to be a much more kind of electric atmosphere, I would think, for the Buffaloes coming to town, and certainly the young man's first taste of a rivalry game. So be interesting how we actually we've talked about the offensive line. This certainly is a game if that defensive line, some of those pass rushers of the Buffs can get on track a little bit. I think it would be a huge kind of sway in the Buffs' favor if they can make a young quarterback uncomfortable, especially early in this one.
Yeah, and that's one thing that was, about last week with North Dakota State. I thought CU, their defensive line did a good job against the run. What they got burned on was some of those quarterback runs, especially by Cam Miller, the starter, and that touchdown in the fourth quarter was a 20-yard run by Miller where he got loose, right? Well, that's one thing that Raiola hasn't done. He hasn't shown that. He had
Yeah.
negative rushing yards his last 2 years of high school, which a lot of times you'll see high school quarterbacks often run the ball, right? And they've got at least a couple hundred yards rushing. Well, he had negative yards his last 2 years, so he's not really a runner at all. Hasn't shown that anyway, and so I don't think they have to worry about that aspect of it. Now, watch him scramble and get a bunch of yards this week, right? But he doesn't show that threat. So I think that helps this defensive
Right.
line in that it's a different type of quarterback you're facing. Is my point, is that you don't have to worry as much about him getting out and burning you with his legs. You can kind of set the edge, focus on the running backs and hopefully get a few sacks as well. Not that it's easy, but I think that this defensive line maybe got some confidence out of last week and can carry that to this week.
Well, how do you see it playing out, Brian? Howell, we'll ask you first before I circle back to me. But big rivalry game. I wrote about this. Feels like it's kind of one of those swing games on the schedule. Certainly the first one among the 12 regular season games. Get this win, and you feel like things might set up pretty well for the next few weeks going forward. If you don't, certainly not the end of the world, but you're not necessarily ahead of the curve of what your expectations might be. So how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a really fun football game. First of all, it's definitely a dangerous one. I think you go to any stadium with 90,000 people, hostile environment, as they say, that's gonna make it difficult. But I've seen the Buffs do it before. I mean, they went in there in 2018, with Steven Montez, Laviska Shenault, and they faced a young hotshot quarterback for Nebraska back then, Adrian Martinez, flushed him a little bit and got a W. And I see the Buffs getting the win again. I think Shador's not going to be rattled. Travis is not going to be rattled. I think this defense is up to the task. I think it's going to be a really good football game. But I'm going to go Buffs 30, Nebraska 27.
Well, I keep coming back to something I mentioned earlier in our conversation here, that it feels like this one, more so than last week, is going to be about winning in the trenches. And I'm just not ready to go there yet with the Buffs. Now, they've played, for a team that only has, 5 wins now in 13 games with Coach Deion Sanders. They've played pretty well on the road, kind of relatively speaking. I know they had a couple duds last year with Oregon and Washington State, but they go down to TCU in that big hype game and, played excellent for the better part of the day. They played pretty well at Arizona State, and it was their last win until this past week. And jumping forward, Ed, even without with Shador Sanders sideline, they played pretty well at Utah at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly gave them a battle. So this team has dialed up some good performances on the road. I'm just not ready to dial up a road win just yet with this bunch. I think it'll be close. I'm with you. I think it's going to be a great game. But I'm going to give Nebraska a slight edge. Please don't email me, folks. But I got 35-31.
Well, it sounds like it'll be a good game either way, based on our predictions. And I will say this too: I don't know how many years in a row now we've heard that Nebraska's back and that this is the year they're going to get it rolling, and they never do. At some point, they're going to. Maybe it's this year. I don't know. But I have a hard time buying into Nebraska hype at this point, just because you've been burned by it so much. Because we've been told for years that they'll be back, and I do like this young quarterback. I think Matt Rule is a good coach and is going to get them turned around. But it's gonna be a fun one either way. I've got the Buffs, you got the Huskers, and I think it's gonna be a fun one. I mean, Saturday night in Lincoln, hey, there's few places that are better than that.
I know you're looking
for college
for,
football. For college football.
Yeah, I know. I know you were at the game, the Steven Montez game, but did you cover many games there, going back a ways?
The only other one I've covered there was 2010, my first season on the beat, the Buffs final game. And they actually had a shot to go to a bowl game. They had fired Dan Hawkins, a couple games before that, won 2 in a row under Brian Cabral and went in 5-6 and just got blasted in that one. And it didn't look good. It was, I don't think it was a night game. It ended at night. Like I remember it being dark, but this is a better Buffs team than 2010. I think this is a better Buffs team than what went in there in 2018 as well. So So yeah, it's a fun atmosphere. I will say, out of all the places that I've covered games, I haven't been all around the country, but of all the places I've covered games, I think Nebraska's Memorial Stadium might be the coolest atmosphere I've covered a game in. So I'm looking forward to it from that aspect.
Interesting. And we're certainly looking forward to your coverage. Going back to your point about waiting for Nebraska to break through, it's one thing, I've been kicking around how I'm going to go with this prediction. And yeah, I thought about, Nebraska's also had a habit in recent years of finding ways to lose at the end of
Yep.
games.
Hmm.
So I'm picking Nebraska, but it wouldn't totally shock me to see something just strange happen late in the game that tilts the outcome in the Buffs' favor. It always seems to happen in Nebraska.
Yeah, well, and Nebraska has found ways to lose all three of these games against CU since they
Yeah.
split conferences, and so who knows? Maybe it's Nebraska's turn. I don't know, but it's gonna be a fun game either way.
Well, looking forward to it. Not much else, quite a bit else, I should say, going on campus this weekend. While you'll be in Lincoln, soccer and volleyball have homestands. Soccer had a game canceled at North Carolina State on Sunday, which was unfortunate. Would have been a kind of a good possible RPI result for the squad, but they come home last set of non-conference games beginning Thursday night, the rivalry matchup against Denver. They finished a non-conference against Weber State on Sunday, and then dive into the Big 12 schedule. And for volleyball, they went 2-1 at the North Texas Invitational in their opening weekend. So we'll have a chance to catch them at home. 3 games at the event center this weekend. Those games at North Texas, they opened with a really thrilling kind of 5-set win against North Texas.
Yeah.
And then were really flat the next day, got swept by Miami and really didn't look good doing it. But as we've talked about, it's a young team, kind of a new look group. And to their credit, they bounced back pretty well. Were able to sweep Rutgers the next day, come home with 2 out of 3 wins. So they get the homestand started against Georgia. We'll also see old Pac-12 friends Washington before the weekend is over. That's on Sunday, and then Fresno State on Saturday. So looking for something to do while you're waiting for kickoff. There'll be some soccer and some volleyball to check out on campus this weekend. But obviously looking forward to things on Saturday night. You're driving there, correct,
Yes.
Brian?
Yeah, because I haven't had enough of road trips over the last couple of
Yeah.
weeks, taking my kids to their new destinations as my 2 oldest have moved out. I did a road trip 2 weekends ago to Logan, Utah. Went last weekend to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and now to Lincoln. So between the 3 weekends, about 4,500 miles I'm going to put on the car. So that's great.
Going to Fort Collins next week is going to be nothing for you.
Right. Yeah. I might fall asleep on that one, no big deal driving to that one. So yeah, that'll be the shortest road trip I've had. I forgot about that one. I'm going to count that as a road trip because I'm going to make it 4 weekends in a row.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not covering a home game, right?
That's right. So it is a road trip. So, well, awesome, Pat. Well, good stuff, and have fun covering some soccer and volleyball. And we'll be back next week to talk about the latest Rocky Mountain Showdown.
Yeah, thanks as always, folks. I'm hanging in there at the Voice this week, but as always, thanks for listening, and we'll have Brian's coverage this weekend.